Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Health Wealth. I'm here joined again by Barry, as usual, and we also have a special guest this week who we're going to meet in a second, who is Sam. I was trying to think of the best way to describe it, and I've gone with triple threat for three of us because threesome and three-way just didn't seem right to me. So we've got a triple threat this week. So first off, Sam, do you want to introduce yourself and what it is you do?
Sure. So Sam Pearson. Since sort of 8 years, we've been running a farming company in North Wales in the UK called Pearson Farming, and we're a fairly diverse business, really. So we are share milking on the home farm where we live. That means we run a dairy farm on behalf of off-farm owners, and it's a grass-based system, 500 cows, all spring calving, and then we sell the milk to Arla, so a big company, big European company. Then we're contract farming a second dairy farm down the road, so about 10 miles away. Same system, just duplicated it in 2019. And down there we have a share of the business, so we own a third of the cows and 50% of the farming business, the contract farming. And then on the side then, which is probably what I'm here to talk about, we've got a small beef unit. So that is entirely grass finished beef. It's 40 acres, so a very small farm for the UK. But it's sort of sideline that I'm particularly interested in. It gets quite a lot of my attention, and yeah, it's grass finished beef. It's quite a rare product in the UK. It's quite slow grown, and we retail it online. So I know you've been buying my beef, which is great, and I want to talk to you about it. So yes, that's where you're at.
Yeah, that's awesome. That is awesome. And your beef is amazing, and you can taste the difference so much from it to normal. I know over the winter you stop for a while, don't you? And I've been I've been buying my beef from the supermarket, and it's not the same. It's not the same. You can tell. Okay, I thought I'd just start with one quick fire question. As you're a farmer, what time do you get up in the morning?
That's a dubious one. So average 6 o'clock probably. We busy times of the year we have to start at 5, and then sometimes the year sort of December, January, it's a bit later start. But I was quite lucky. I went away to travel, so I went away to South America this last January, and it was early mornings all month there, so I didn't get time off.
No rest for the wicked. No rest for the wicked. Yeah, I'll ask you later about that. I was going to ask about South American stuff because you went to visit farms and things like that over there, didn't you? So yeah, we'll get onto that later. So first off, you've already explained. My first question was about what do you farm and what's on your farm. You've already gone through that. So my next question would be, how did you get into it?
Well, I was born and bred on a small beef and sheep farm in Snowdonia, which is a national park in North Wales, and we had very few livestock. Really, we had sort of 6 or 8 cows and 70 or 80 sheep, but the foundations are there, and when you're born and bred on it, it's gets in your blood of it, and it's all you want to do. So from there I went and did college and education things, and went away to look for work on bigger farms. Wasn't so much employed work in that area, so I went to Shropshire and worked there for a few years on a big dairy farm, and Mid Wales, South Wales, and then settled up here in 2015. And it's such a slow skill to learn. You invest a lot of time into learning it, and then it's what you know, and yeah, you're hooked. So that's it.
Yeah, I bet it's as you say, it's in the blood. You were already there, you grew up with it, and you've gone into it. I imagine from what I hear, it's a tough industry to be in, but I imagine quite rewarding too, is it?
It's extremely rewarding. It's fairly difficult to describe, I suppose, because it's such a different industry, and it's very, very diverse range of skills that you need, and it's life and death every day, isn't it, with livestock? But it's quite challenging, like you said. Times it can be stressful because it's busy times of year, but it's all we want to do. And when you take new people on, we've got 4 or 5 people working here. One young chap's come from London in January, and he's 18, and it's completely new to him. And it's been great showing him, teaching him. But you can tell it's just every day is eye-opening experience for him, because like things crop up and you're just teaching him new stuff every day. And he's really got into it, so that's been great. And the rewarding bit, I suppose, it's not always financial. So you put so much effort into the thing, and you're breeding cows and breeding the next cows that come through, selecting genetics and that sort of thing, and you're improving your farm and seeing the grass grow better. And with the beef side of it, getting feedback from customers, and particularly for me really is we've got a young family, so a big part of doing the beef, producing the beef, is to feed our own family like the best quality beef we can possibly produce. And when you sit down and your children under 10 years old are tucking into some grass finished fillet, it's pretty rewarding, really. Yeah, something to get back.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. I'm also trying to get my kids onto eating as much meat as I can do. So that's definitely, like you say, it's rewarding to be able to get them to, and for you to be able to know that you're giving them the best quality because you've produced it yourself.
Yeah,
that's brilliant. Barry, I don't know where you need to get hooked up with Sam's meat too. I don't know where you get your beef from at the moment, but you need to try it for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just the mention of that is starting to make me hungry, you know. It sounds, the way Sam was describing it, you know, just getting that fresh, you know, beef in, and, you know, that's reared and, you know, by yourselves, and so, you know, it's very direct the way it's you know, it doesn't go through all the various you know, through supermarkets and everything, that you've just got it there, and that sounds amazing. Yeah, definitely always on the lookout for better quality meats, and we've got a couple of local butchers here, and I do use, especially for like chuck steak, mince and eggs, but particularly beef. If I can get it better quality outside of the supermarket, then I'm always looking for new avenues and ways to do that. So no, that sounds absolutely fantastic. And yeah, I suppose as being very keen and very you know, meat being a major part of my diet, you know, beef in particular, you know, that's something that I'm looking to learn more about. I did actually get my brother, I think it was a Farmazon.co voucher for his Christmas, in order to order some, I think it was like £50 worth of meat from that, obviously from a better source than a supermarket. You know, I'm not sure how much better it was in comparison to, you know, various farms, but it's something that I will look to do like more regularly for sure. So it's really interesting to hear your story on that, Sam.
And while we're on the subject of quality of the meat, could you kind of run us through what kind of are the big differences between, because I think, now I could be wrong, so correct me if I'm wrong, there's grass fed and grass finished, and then is there just then grain fed completely? And what's kind of the difference between the different types?
Yeah, it's really important for people to understand, really, and I can see why it can be confusing. So the conventional beef industry in the UK, all around the world, would be, you want to get a low days to slaughter. So you want to rear the animal very quickly, as quickly as possible. Half of that is genetics and half of it's feeding. So basically the farm's working with very small margins, and you want to get a volume of livestock through your business, finished, sold, and they go to a slaughterhouse. Huge volumes every day. So there's a big slaughterhouse in the Midlands. They'd be killing 450 odd cows a day. And then they trim it up and get it as quickly out to the supermarket, as quickly as possible, out to customers at as low a cost as possible, isn't it? To get cheap food and cheap nutrition, basically. So that would be no particular mention of what it gets fed, but it would be like quite a starchy corn diet that it gets finished on. And the finish is the last 3 months. But a lot of the meats would get that finisher diet all the way through. So that's like corn and maize and just molasses and imported stuff like soya, palm kernel, or whatever, all blended up. And the minimum amount of forage possible. So like 50% of the diet is forage or less. And that's just to get it through, get it finished very quickly. It's a very efficient way of doing it to get like kilos out of the gate. Then you have grass fed, and that means the animal has had a proportion of its diet has been grass through its life. And it's a bit of a grey area, really. I think it doesn't mean it has to be finished on grass. It can go into a shed to be finished and get a diet, but it's had grass in its life. That'd be grass-fed beef. And then grass-finished beef, which is what we're doing. The animal has had grass all its life, and it's just fed grass until it's finished. So it's a much slower process. The cattle are on our farm up to a year longer than they would be in a shed, or even longer than that, really. I generally say 30 to 50% longer. And that's quite seasonal as well. So like you said, we stopped doing it in the winter because the grass stops growing. We feed them conserved grass, which is silage, and they don't tend to fatten on that, really. And then in February, we go back to just grass, and they're getting really, really high protein grass. So it's like 30% protein, and they're just stacking the weight on, getting fat. And the fat itself is visibly different. So it's yellow. It's got all this beta carotene in it. So you can just look at the two meats straight away, and you can tell it's been grass finished just by the look of it. So that'd be the main difference, really. And obviously, because the cattle are longer on our system, the beef costs more to the customer, which is something I can't get around, really. And we price it at what's sustainable for our farm. So we're farming without any subsidies at all. So the farm has to pay all the bills. The beef has to pay all the bills and pay our time. And basically, the profit from the enterprise is me feeding the family. So that's what we take. We're not taking cash out of it, really. We're just taking good quality meat out of it for the family. And I'm very, very happy with that. Like, it's really good. And the other thing we do is we mature the beef for 21 days, and we mature the entire carcass. And when you do that, you're basically concentrating the flavor, because you lose about 10 to 12% of the weight in moisture. So moisture comes out of it, but it doesn't mean it makes it dry. It's actually quite the opposite. So when you cook it, you've intensified everything, and it's more flavoursome and like succulent. Yeah. So that's a really big part of our beef. And the difference maybe with the mince that you buy in the supermarket is it hasn't been matured at all. So it's like the trim from the carcasses, all the fore end and around the neck area and the brisket and all that bit, all the stuff that's not like recognised cuts, would all go together, get minced up, straight out to the supermarket and sold, which is fine, but it's probably lacks the flavour compared to our beef, which would be just matured and then minced up. And the other big difference that we get when we sell a box of beef, all the cuts that you're buying are from the same animal. And I only sort of recently realised how different that is to the supermarket, because the mince that you buy, even in one pack, might be from a few different animals, isn't it? That's just been slaughtered on the same day. And when you see all the steaks on the shelves and stuff, they're not quite the same shape and things. They're all different animals, which is fine. If you're feeding millions of people, that's how you got to do it. But when you're buying a box from us, you're buying a box from the one animal that was slaughtered 3 weeks before, matured, cut up by the butcher by how we request it cut up, packed, and sent straight out to your house. So that'd be the main differences, really.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear that, because I knew a tiny bit on the differences, but to actually understand the actual differences and the processes is really interesting for people to understand. Because I think as well, what was really interesting was the points on grass fed, because I almost feel like grass fed makes you think that that's the one that has grass. Like grass finished could make you think that just finishes on grass. Grass fed, yeah. You could think it's its whole life, but it's the other way around. So that's really interesting. I didn't know that before.
Yes. I don't think there's various certification bodies that you can have a sticker on the beef and things. We haven't actually entered anything except for farm assurance. So we go through a farm assurance process where someone comes and inspects the farm once a year, but it doesn't mean anything on the grass fed and things. It just means like there's a basic level of standard being done on our farm, which is recognized in the UK. And we do all the marketing and things ourselves. There is a crowd, and I can't remember the name, so that's not much good. What are they called? I don't know. But they do certify that animals have only had grass all their lives. And that's maybe growing a little bit. I don't quite know where they retail it. I don't think it's online. I think it's just stickers that you'd see in farm shops. So yeah, you could look out for things like that. But the grass-fed bit, it's slightly dubious, isn't it? If it's finished on corn, you know, you're just saying the animal's had a bit of grass in its life. So it's one of those things, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously we've finished applying to the basic last 3 months of its life. That's all that's going to be in its body, really. When it does, I doubt food from 6 months ago is still going to be there. So
yeah. And I particularly noticed, like I did a little bit of experimenting 4 or 5 years ago when we were starting it out, and I think the last 2 weeks, the diet in the last 2 weeks of the animal is really, really important, that it gets like lush green grass, and I think that brings loads of taste and flavour to the beef. You don't notice things like that when you're running a busy commercial farm, because the cattle go off your farm, they get slaughtered by someone else and sold by someone else. You get paid, and you're busy rearing the next cattle. So it's quite slow to learn things like that yourself. You've got to just take the interest and do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously I can personally attest to the fact that it's a better flavour. It's much more enjoyable. Do you know much in terms of the health benefits to humans of having it grass-fed as opposed to corn-fed, or do you not really look into that too much?
It's something I'm really interested in learning more about, and I do read articles about it, but I don't want to make exact claims. I know there's stuff with like the omega-3s, and as particularly in the fat, I think is slightly different chemical composition to regular beef. And I think, well, when I eat it anyway, I don't eat a lot of regular beef, but I think the fat is particularly flavoursome. Like you eat it all, you don't leave your sort of edge and stuff of the steak on the plate. And yeah, there's loads of claims made, isn't it? And you can read articles about it. Half of it for me really is just knowing exactly how the cattle were reared and what they are, and just what is in your food and the children's food. I try and, like anyone else, we're a busy family, so the children do eat lots of other food as well, but it's just good to know like a big part of their diet is our beef. So that's great. Yeah.
Absolutely. We talk about children's nutrition quite a lot. I've got 2 kids as well, so it's something quite close to my heart. And I just feel the diet that's out there at the moment as a whole is poisoning kids. You know, parents without knowing. Obviously, they're not doing it deliberately, but because of the lack of education, that they're poisoning their kids. And it's something we want to get a lot more education out there about it to try and help people. And obviously, for you, that's absolutely perfect that you know exactly what you're giving them and what's gone into it. And you're right that one of the main kind of benefits of it is that you know what's gone into it. You know, you buy it from a supermarket, it's been grain fed, it's whatever, maybe slightly worse for you, maybe not. But then what else has it had put in it during that time, which we don't know.
Yeah.
It's still going to be a lot better than sugary snacks and highly processed food, isn't it? Like any meat is better.
That's true. That's true. That is, and that's something we kind of encourage as well. Like if you can get grass-fed, great cuts of meat, brilliant. But obviously it's not affordable for everyone. So, you know, as long as you're eating meat, it's better than eating the other options. But obviously if you can afford it and you can getting the best cuts is obviously going to be optimal for you. But, you know, you've got to do what you can with your situation.
Yeah, just sometimes, isn't it? It doesn't have to be all the meat. Like it's just a good thing to try, I think. I don't know if you've come across that when you were saying about the knowledge now. I've only just this week really had a play with that chat GPT thing, the AI. And I think that's going to be incredible for health in the UK, because at the moment it seems to be non-biased. And I was putting in some questions about food and beef and, you know, highly processed food and things, and it was giving decent answers, isn't it? So with the knowledge barrier, I think that's going to help a lot for parents anyway, for children, because it's like hollow nutrition, isn't it? You're eating all the time, but you're still hungry and you're gaining weight. But you're not satiating yourself. And I think with children, particularly, I see with mine when they're eating poor quality stuff, they're just eating all the time and grazing away, and the only satiation is like their stomach being full. It's not like filling their cravings for stuff. And when they're growing, that's twice as important, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's the diet is basically sugar. Other than meat and fats, it's everything else is pretty much sugar. So it's very important to try and keep on top of it. I eat personally, I pretty much eat carnivore diet. So I'm basically just meat. My kids still eat some non-meat, but I've been, trying to get them eating more, which can be difficult with young children if they haven't grown up with that, getting them onto meat. So great for you that yours are already eating plenty of meat. That's perfect for them.
Still a big challenge with this. Like when you're busy and all that, you feel like you're producing this fantastic nutrition for everybody else, busy, and then you're coming in and children need feeding and stuff, and you end up doing something quick. And I know exactly how it is, especially when you haven't got a big freezer full of grass-fed beef or grass-finished beef in your house anyway. You need to go and buy everything. It's a challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. It can be. One other thing I wanted to talk about was obviously the whole kind of narrative against meat. One of the angles they try and give is the whole environmental thing and things like that, and that it's not sustainable. So what's your, do you have like kind of a view on that, and what's your kind of argument for it? I mean, personally, I do believe it's sustainable, but interested to hear your point of view on it.
Yeah, I think it's there's a range of systems, and I've seen a lot of them. On the whole, it's sustainable. There's a big farce, isn't there, with like the gas and the methane and carbon dioxide and all that. But it's a cycle. You're not producing new gas really. I know the methane it's just a very much slower cycle, but you can't compare it to how humans are trashing the earth with their plastic and bloody fumes and all that in general. But I think farming can be improved. There are systems that are not sustainable, and there's a lot being done about that now, isn't it? We're taking it seriously in this country. We're just going into, it's called NVZ, so nitrate vulnerable zones, and farms have to clean up their act if there's any sort of pollutions and that sort of thing going on. It just takes investment, isn't it? And if your farmers are poor in the country, it's a big problem, like environmental problem and just a general problem for your country. The farmer wants his own environment to be nice and clean, and he wants to enhance it for his children, and he wants to produce good food. You can only do that if you're making a profit and you're returning back from your system. And if you're pushing farmers down into like micro margins, they're going to cut corners. They're not going to have the money to reinvest in the infrastructure that you need. And that's like tanks to hold the slurry through the winter so that you can apply it to your fields when they need it to grow crops and grow grass. And that's very natural. It's what needs to happen. It's fantastic. But if you're struggling for investments and that sort of thing, the first thing that lacks is infrastructure, because you're just trying to survive. And in those situations, it's not sustainable. It's not good for the environment. So I think it's a big part of it is just farmers being able to be profitable and have enough money to return the investment to the farm, maybe some guidance on that side of thing. There's big changes happening with subsidy and that sort of thing in the UK, where we've changed from Europe to subsidising our own farmers in this country. And I think probably improvements can be made there, where the subsidy is more targeted on, improving things for the environment and infrastructure particularly. But I don't agree at all with like cutting livestock numbers and that sort of thing. It's just a lot of rubbish. There used to be much more ruminant livestock than there is now in the world. So that's nonsense,
Yeah.
And just on that, Sam, in terms of the processes on the farm, I mean, I've heard that recently that farmers in the Netherlands have had quite a tough time of it, and I was just interested to hear if that was to do with their policies needing or their processes needing to be improved, or was this more of a global sort of attack on reducing the amount of farming and the amount of meat that could be produced, because obviously I certainly believe there's a stigma, against that's forming right now. I just wanted to hear you had any thoughts on that situation?
Yeah, I've seen a couple of clips about it. I don't know much about it in Holland really, but I've been there a few times a few years ago. I'm visiting farms, and it's very intensive farming there. So they're probably quite different to the UK really, where they've got a lot of livestock and everything's pushed quite hard for production. But it sounds very hard what they're doing, like I think they compulsory purchase some farms. And I wouldn't like to see that in the UK really. It's a bad policy, isn't it? It's not sustainable. It's not fair. And I think, like you were saying, the stigma and globally pushing against the meat production is, at the minute, it's decentralized. Like farmers are quite individual and they're all running their own businesses. And the other side of the coin, or the other option that they're offering, is to centralize your food production to great big companies that are going to produce in a lab produce meat, and like this fungus and whatever it is, and eat the bugs and all that. And I don't believe that if you're got a brain in your head that you think that's better to centralize your food production to a few big companies and just eat what you're given. Like that's
not at all. I think that the traditional model should be kept, and I can see where that's going. So there's no way that that's a better alternative. But obviously you'll have a much better insight into that through your experience.
I'd encourage people to get to know a farmer, basically, isn't it? And buy direct. Yeah. And I don't mean our beef, we haven't got enough to supply everyone, but there's a local farmer near you who can definitely supply you with stuff. And that makes his system much more robust, because most farms have got like one buyer. So you've got one milk buyer or one buyer of your cattle or whatever, or, you haven't got many buyers. But once you've got customers wanting your actual product, your farm is much more resilient, and it can't be broken really, because you're a price maker. Most farms in the UK are price takers. So you have this very, very long cycle of production where you're breeding cattle and you've got to rear them for 2 years until they have a calf, and then you've got to rear that calf for 2 years until it's fat, and then you slaughter it, and you're only selling it once. And when you've got a very slow cycle of production, you've got all those input costs over 2 or 3 years, and then the market can change and you're caught out. But when you set your price, right, this is the price that works for my farm, I know what my cost of production is. You set your price, and all you've got to do then is sell. So you gain customers who want your produce, who like your produce, and that just makes your farm so much more sustainable, and your whole business really. Being a price taker is very, very difficult. So on the milk side of things, I run this dairy farm, and last year we had a phenomenal milk price. This year it's crashed through the floor. So it's just going to work out as average, but it's quite difficult to manage that fluctuation. Like, you've got big costs going out last year, with feed price went up and the fertilizer price and everything went up on the dairy farm. And then, you just got to manage that cash all the time, the cash flow. And it's quite challenging,
Yeah, that's great advice. And I would encourage everyone else to do that, to find a local farm and support them and buy from them, because the only way, people say a lot about, we need to, look after farmers and do whatever, but then they go and buy their food from the supermarket, and the only thing that counts, your support and your opinion doesn't really make any difference. You buying from them is what makes a difference, like you say. It allows them to keep going. So yeah, definitely everyone should do that. Find a good farm, or if you can, if there's one around, and buy from meat, eggs, whatever they're selling, and you're going to get better quality food too. So it's not like you're losing out from doing that. So go on.
Yeah, sorry. Go on. Well, just a lot of farms, like we'd be a very, very small farm, our beef farm. A lot of farms would be much, much bigger. So they'd sell maybe 90% of their product would go that on the mainstream and go to the supermarkets. But they probably, if they could gain some local customers or like direct customers, they can still put 10% of the produce through, direct, and that helps the farm a lot and helps them feed their own family and that sort of thing. So yeah, definitely approach farmers, I would.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great advice to encourage everyone to do that. Another thing I wanted to ask was just if you could give us a little kind of behind the scenes of what you do on running the farm. Like what's your, I mean, I imagine it's very different day to day, but yeah, a little insight into what you have to do. I imagine it's a very busy life.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So it's very seasonal. The system we run is working with nature. So we're busy in the spring when it's like the natural time for animals to give birth. So we get all the dairy cows to calve in February and March. And then that means that the lactation curve is like that. And the lactation curve is a year long. So she does a lot of milk when the calf's very young. Obviously, these are dairy cows who we're selling the milk. And we want the cows to peak in production when the grass is peaking in production. So that's this time of year, May and June. And this time of year, I'm very busy breeding the cows. So we're getting the cows pregnant again. We do that with artificial insemination. So the reason we do that, so I do it all it's on 6 sites at the minute. The reason we do it, there's a lot of stigma and stuff about that I see online popping up, and absolute nonsense and rubbish. And the reason we do it is to improve the herd. We want to use the best genetics from around the world. So we're currently using genetics from New Zealand, which is much ahead of the UK on doing this production system. So we can select bulls based on the criteria we need to improve this particular herd. So we identify the worst sort of traits in our cows. So if we want to improve feet or improve udders or improve production, we can select the particular bulls and we use them here in like frozen semen, and we serve the cows when they're bulling. And that means that we can make rapid genetic improvement in our cows. And a big part of that now is actually methane reduction and being more efficient for the environment, obviously. And yeah, so at the minute I'm serving probably 60, 70 cows a day on the different sites. So that's what we're busy doing. And as we go, that'll finish in June. And then it's just milking and grazing the cows. We're conserving silage for the winter. So that is cutting the surplus grass and conserving it. It sort of pickles it in bales. And then in December, we dry the cows off. So we're not milking then for 2 months. Cows get a rest, we get a rest, and we start busy again in the spring. And on the beef farm, it's simply moving the cows every 2 or 3 days to fresh grass. So we're just driving intake. They're getting palatable fresh grass every two or 3 days until they graze that area down, and then they're moved on. And we have a very, very, well, it's a genius setup, again, from New Zealand called techno grazing. And a very good friend of mine, James Daniels, came and installed it for me, helped me set it all up. And it's like, it makes it very easy to give the cows a new piece of grass as often as you want. So basically you're moving them around a little section of your farm, which means all the rest of the farm gets rested and it's growing grass. The grass is basically solar panels, nature solar panels. So it just wants sunlight and a rest and rain. And the sort of traditional system would be just put your cows in the field and let them get on with it. But we find that's quite inefficient because you keep grazing the new regrowth of the grass. So as we move them around, all the rest of the farm gets the rest and rain, and it can grow again. So all we need to do is move some electric fences like that goes behind them and in front of them, and move the water. And the cows are very, very happy. That's what we do.
Pretty interesting.
Once a month there, we're processing. So that's the only job, really.
That's really interesting about the kind of the science that goes into it with the artificial insemination and choosing what you want, and even with the system you have set up with the grass. Like you say, people just think cows in the field and then, get a bull in to impregnate them and whatever. It's interesting to hear all the science that goes into it and how things are kind of improved over time.
Yeah, we have on the 2 dairy farms, actually, we measure the grass every week in every paddock. And then there's really good software called AgriNet, which helps us manage it, because obviously this time of year you get tremendous growth and you've got to sort of keep on top of the grass. So you need to move your cows around to wherever on the farm the most grass is. So they get a new piece every 12 hours, and we milk them twice a day. And we use this AgriNet to help us manage it, really, and manage the surplus and keep the grass between 2 heights, which is the fastest growth. So it's very slow. When it's short, it's very slow because it hasn't got much solar panels. And when it gets long, it goes very slow because it tries to reach a seed head and reproduce. So we're trying to knock it back down to the short level every 3 weeks on the dairy farm. And that gives us tremendous pasture production, basically, through the year. That's my job on the dairy farm. That's what I've got to do. It sounds easier than it is.
Definitely. You basically got a team of robot lawnmowers. They're just every few weeks keeping it at the right length. That's awesome. That is, like I say, I don't think most people would even think about that kind of tech and that kind of thought going into the whole process. So it's really interesting to hear that. And so I just wanted to speak a bit about, you mentioned it before, about when you spent some time in South America. And I think, were you kind of visiting farms and learning some of how they do things? So what did you kind of learn there?
Oh, I learned so much. So my friend was doing a Nuffield scholarship, which is a fantastic thing in the UK, where you're funded to go and visit other countries in the world for 12 weeks altogether. And at the end, you write a report on your findings. So you go to study a topic, basically. You write a report on your findings and do a presentation. All the reports are available online for free for other farmers to learn. And the presentations are all on YouTube. So it's a really good thing. And we'd sort of planned it in the start of that COVID, and we decided we'll leave it until it's all over, because it just makes the traveling and stuff easier. So I was going along to assist him and open the gates. That's what I said. But basically, I ended up arranging it all and organising it all for him. So I'll get that on tape. And yeah, we went away and learned so much. Like, it's very, very different culture, and everything's so different there. So they produce a lot of the food that we eat in this country. It gets imported here, so exported there. And basically the scale and the variation across the country was absolutely mind-blowing for me. The difference between Buenos Aires region on the La Pampa in Argentina, which is probably the best farmland in the world, and then Patagonia in the south, which was like arid and dry and very challenging farming. It was tremendous, seeing it all there. What did I learn? In Chile, the fruit production was incredible. So they export everything from there to China and Europe. And yeah, it was a bit mind-blowing seeing cherries there being picked when they're ripe. And then they're going to arrive in Holland, I think he said 6 weeks later, then get moved to a supermarket and then have a 2-week shelf life. I don't quite know how that works. And I'd imagine there must be a lot of chemicals or something involved, because their own greengrocers there, the stuff was perishing in like 3 days. And that was the same fruit that was being picked from the orchards and things. So that was interesting to see. And I definitely had to think about that. Also in Chile, in the south, there was like Osorno region, which is very similar to Wales, and a big dairy farming region there. It was good to see just the production really in the warm climate. It was tremendous. And you can see in that La Pampa region in Argentina, they were double cropping. So what we can produce once a year here, they were basically harvesting twice a year in the same field, just from having so much. Wow, the conditions are perfect for growing forage, basically. So it was good to see the difference. Yeah, very, very different. The big thing I learned there as well, or I couldn't help but notice, was the people were so much healthier in general. People on the streets were they were beautiful, aesthetic, thin, healthy, vibrant. They looked really good, and they eat loads of meat, like way more than we eat. So beef with like all week they're eating beef. There's butchers in every little street corner in those towns in Argentina. And you couldn't help but notice it. You couldn't go there and not notice how different, people on the street looked in the UK. And it's got to be diet. Like there's nothing else different really. They get a bit more sun, but the diet is very, very different. And I think they're more connected with where their food comes from. And in general, don't think supermarkets are a big thing there. Didn't seem to be many about really. And just loads of small independent shops. I think when you have that, you're more connected with farming anyway. There's just less of a supply chain, less rubbish. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's a much better way to do it. And that, the bigger countries like America and the UK and Europe, where you've got these big conglomerates just controlling everything, they're just gonna, they don't care about you, they just care about profits, and they're just gonna make it as cheap as they can, as rubbish as they can, give it to you, and you haven't got much options going anywhere else. If there's little individual shops everywhere, if someone starts selling rubbish, everyone will go somewhere else. So it's there's the competition too to keep them honest. But having that food, as you say, close to source, that's a huge difference too. Like you're saying about the example of the cherries, for the majority of fruit and veg that people eat have been sprayed with who knows what chemicals to keep them fresh. So yeah, having it right there is a huge difference. And I know that Argentinian steak, I know, is quite a big thing, and it's in lots of restaurants and stuff. So is that sort of one of the best qualities around the world there is?
Well, I had the privilege of eating a lot of steak when I was over there as for research purposes. And I'm very, very proud to say that I didn't have one that was as good as our steak. So
there we go.
Well.
There we go. So
we did have phenomenal steak out there. It was really, really good. But yeah, nothing as good as Pearson Farming Baidiog beef. But I was going to say as well, on the chemicals and the spraying you were talking about, one visit in particular really, really blew my mind. And that was to a farm that was producing peanuts on a huge scale. So we went into this peanut farm, and there was 500 hectares of peanuts, basically as far as you could see all around you. And the peanut companies pay a lot of money to use the land for 6 months to grow a crop. And the farmer and the landowner, it's a good option for them financially, but they know that it degrades the soil, and they were spraying it between 7 and 11 times on one crop with chemicals. And there was only certain crops you could grow afterwards. The farmer was explaining to us, it's a big decision for him because there's so much residual chemical in the soil after taking this peanut crop. You're confined to growing only 2 or 3 different species for several seasons afterwards until the chemicals gone away. And things like that was a big eye opener for me. I'm seeing the discarded chemical cans in the farmyard. You just start to realize, bloody hell, when you pick up a Snickers bar or whatever's got peanuts in the bar or something, you don't even think, it doesn't even cross your mind where it's come from and what might be in it or whatever. We know it's all safe because it's passing loads of standards, isn't it, to be imported and things to the UK. But I just think the supply chain is so long. When you're far away from where it's come from, you don't even know exactly what's happened, doesn't it? And that was a really interesting visit for me to that farm. Yeah. The soft fruit as well. I know that it loses a lot of nutrition, doesn't it? I think I can't remember how many, but over so many days it halves how much vitamins and stuff is in it. So with that long travel from South America to Rotterdam and then over to the UK and on the lorry and then the shelf life in the supermarket, I don't know exactly how much nutrition you're getting in the fruit, basically, compared to picking it off a tree in your garden and eating it. So that was another thing.
Yeah, definitely. It's there's not a lot of nutrition. We're not eating very naturally. By the time it reaches you, it's hardly representative of what it would be at source. Like you said, it's very different. It's things that people don't think about and need to be aware of. Like you said, with all the chemicals, people eat stuff, they don't pay attention to what might have been sprayed on it and what might have been added to it to preserve it and to get it to the shop for them to eat. So kind of things like that we try and encourage people to think about because they do have an effect. Even if they say there's only a small amount left, that builds up over time. and it is bad for people. And as you said before about how much healthier they looked, it is clearly down to diet, and that's what it is. Pretty much all of the health conditions we have in the world today are just purely down to diet. So that's the main thing that people really need to address in their lives, and do it by finding a farmer and buying local and getting some proper food where you know where it's come from and where it's been produced. And that's the only way that you can have any kind of control of what's in it. You know,
you can experiment, can't you? You can try. It doesn't cost you much to experiment.
Exactly.
One more point on there I've got to make. I'm very careful not to knock anybody and knock anybody's farming system, because I've got so many friends who are farming, and these farmers are so welcoming for me to visit their places. And I've returned the offer, so they're all invited to come and visit our farm. But you know, you make some personal opinions, don't you, when you go and see things? And one thing I really did notice was, on all these farms that we visited, doesn't matter how intensive the farm was. So it might be 1,000 hectares, 5,000 hectares, you know, huge farms compared to the UK. And all the land is being farmed really, really intensively. And every single one of them had 5 hectares by the house. And that's where we produce our vegetables for the house organically. There's no chemicals. You know, we do it all by hand. The farm staff do the weeding. And that's how we eat when we're visiting them. All this other food on the 5,000 hectares, that's exported. That goes to China, Europe. You know, we're just selling that. And that's how they live. You know, that's how they get their income. And that was a big thing to note as well. You know, they're not eating it themselves. They've got their own vegetable patch, and that's done with manure and traditional methods, weeding by hand, picking it by hand, eating it straight away when it's been picked, or preserving it using, you know, traditional methods and that sort of thing. And people forget that, isn't it? Because they're not connected with their food at all. They just eat it out of a packet because they presume it's safe for you. It's got marketing and a label and all that. And I think, yeah, it's very noticeable to see. Go and visit some countries where people are not doing that, and maybe financially they're less well off, but their health and just well-being, I think they're better.
Really good point. Yeah, right at the end there, really good point. Especially with the connection to health and well-being, for sure. Because, you know, as Ryan just touched on, it's very much related to what you're eating, is very much related to your health and your well-being and your ability to handle, you know, things like stress as well, and to fund that, not to facilitate, especially if you're into, you know, athletics and sports. You know, you need to have a strong constitution that's primarily made up of protein and a meat. What I believe is a meat heavy diet as well. So yeah, it's got a real strong connection between the two.
I think when you talk about that meat heavy diet, you don't realize how tiring digesting is, because you don't feel, it's not a muscle, but it just drains you when you eat stuff that's hard to digest and whatever, and all that rubbish and junk food. You're tired because your body's just working away, managing all this crap that's coming in, compared to eating lean meat and good protein and just good quality stuff, and drinking plenty of water and that sort of thing. You just got more energy about you, isn't it? You definitely notice it. Yeah,
absolutely, because eating generally is a toll on the body. So you, to make sure that, so what you're eating, if it's good quality, is going to reduce that toll on the body and just make the whole process of digestion a lot easier. Yeah, absolutely, you can only get that by eating nutritious food, as you say. So,
and ironically, red meat is what they try and say is hard to digest. That's one of the things they try and throw at it, whereas actually rubbish. It's not. Yeah. It's the other foods, which is, you know, makes a mess of your insides and does all kinds of harm, whereas meat and fat is very good to your system, and your body will thank you for feeding it that. I really found that last point you made so interesting as well, about the farmers, how they don't eat the crops that are mass produced. You know, they know that they're no good for you. Obviously they've got to make profit and they've got to run their farm, so they do that for the companies, and then, you know, they know that the best way is to keep it simple for their own, and that just kind of proves the whole point. and is I'm sure a big reason why they're so much more healthy.
Yeah, and that was so interesting to see, because we traveled a vast area. We flew to Peru, and we went to sort of central Argentina, drove across the Andes, drove down Chile, drove back across to Patagonia, and then flew up to Uruguay and went around Uruguay, and then flew back from back to Peru and flew home. So it was a huge area that we covered, and we kept seeing that same thing crop up. Like, these farmers are never going to meet each other. They're not even in the same country, but they've all got like a beast and their own chickens, and just that's how they live for themselves, like sustenance farming. And the rest of the farmers in commercial agriculture, small margins, huge volume, not many people working there. And the goal is just to get as much product sold as possible to pay the bills, basically, for the rest of the farm. Yeah, so it was really noticeable. The first thing I did when I came back was subscribe to a veg box from our neighbour, because I thought, you know what, we need to reduce how much stuff we're buying in and we don't really know where it's coming from. I looked in the fridge, and there's healthy looking stuff there, and then you look at the labels like Spain, Chile, bloody places in Europe, Portugal and whatever, and you just think, you know what, this could all be coming a mile away. So
yeah. That's one of the other benefits of kind of eating the way that we do with a carnivore diet, is that you're not eating a huge range of food anyway, so it's reasonably easy to get it all from the one place and keep it simple and basic. And I like to keep it simple, have a bit more control over what you're eating, and I think that's definitely a good way to be. Keeping simple and basic is the best way to look after your health. You don't need to complicate it. I think obviously you're a very busy man. We don't want to take up too much of your time. I don't know, Barry, if you've got any more questions to throw in before we let Sam leave.
No, Sam's answered. He's made some great points and answered some great questions there. Just in terms of, I did find the making contact and a connection with your local farmer really interesting. So, for all the people out there, do you have like any advice on a system how best to do that, or how best to make contact or to even research it? Is there any advice you could give, Sam, on?
Yeah, certainly. So it is, farms are private places as well, isn't it? So I wouldn't, go and trespass and that sort of thing immediately.
Yeah.
And I think that social media is the easiest place, because the people who are on social media are already putting themselves out there. And there's lots of like hashtags and things on Twitter. It'd be very, very easy to find a few farmers, and you can find them locally, and just get following them and seeing what they're doing, what they're up to, taking an interest. And before you know it, you'll be invited, or you start a conversation and go that way. Your local farmer it's not just your food. He's in charge of a big part of your environment around where you live. And that's a big responsibility for the farmer, and it's something that you should take interest in anyway, your environment and around you. So I think it's good to at least know your local farmer. And that might be, asking in the pub or the butcher or the local places, and you'll soon find out. I'd respect the privacy, isn't it? I wouldn't just go trespassing anyway. It's not to be encouraged.
That's good advice. So social media.
Get to know them slowly, and just see what they're doing, and then just be sort of reasonably inquisitive, mildly inquisitive about it, and then just build or really from there.
There's a thing called Open Farm Sunday, which is fantastic. So I definitely get involved with that. So if you look online on Open Farm Sunday, those are farms who want to put themselves out there, and they invite you to visit the farm on a Sunday when it's happening. There's hundreds of local people go there, and they'll show you around the farm and explain the system and that sort of thing. And the hashtags on Twitter is I can't think of it now. There's plenty of them anyway. You just go and search on there.
Well, I'm sure we'll find, and we'll pop it into the description when we release this, I'm sure. So
they love you taking an interest in it, because it's such a challenging job, and you're doing it, just to produce food for people. So if you take an interest, it's great. Yeah, really, really good.
That's great advice. So social media, the best place to find it, and Open Farm Sunday sounds like a great day out just for the kids. Never mind just to find food. I'm going to look into that. Yeah,
really, really
that
good
sounds
for the
good.
kids, yeah.
Yeah, awesome. And obviously, while we're talking social media, do you want to give yourself a shout out where people can find you guys if they wanted to order some of your meat?
Certainly, yeah. So on Twitter, I'm Pearson Farming, and on Instagram, I'm Sam Brondano, which is the name of my farm when I was growing up. But the website is pearsonfarming.com. I go there and it says it's very, very simple, one-page website. But that's the place to order it. And there's a bit of description about the beef and that sort of thing. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for coming on. We really appreciate it. As I said, you're a very busy man. I appreciate you making time. It's been really interesting. This is one of the ones I've been looking forward to the most of our podcast, and it's not disappointed. It's not disappointed at all. I've learned a lot. It's been great. So thank you so much for coming on. We will see everyone again next week for another episode, and let's get optimal together. Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning into the show. I really hope that you enjoyed it. If you have any questions or topics you'd like us to cover on the podcast, or you'd like to appear on it, then please contact us at hwpoduk@gmail.com, on our website, which is healthwealthuk.com, or on any of our social medias, which are at hwpoduk. Please make sure you like, subscribe, share it with all your friends and family, and we will see you next week.